things.
Hello. So yeah, as Kirsten said, I'm at Edinburgh Napier University, and as some of you will know, some of you won't, we're very new to initial teacher education. So we started up in 2019. We're still waiting to have a normal year, and so we actually have Pete Early, who is on the Isle of Arran with us today. So he was one of our first cohort, and he's a mathematician. Amna is a biologist, and she's in the midst of doing her probation. And Rory is a physicist, and he is still under my wing at Edinburgh Napier as a PGDE student this year. I was really lucky to have full school remit for learning for sustainability when I was still a teacher, before I came into the job at Napier. And so when I came into the job, I knew that the standards were going to be changing with a greater emphasis on learning for sustainability. So it was really important for me that that was embedded from the outset, because I knew that our students were going to need that in their practice. I think it's really important for me to now just take a step back and let them talk about how they have actually used it within their practice. And I don't know, Kirsten, if you wanted me to lead this discussion or whether you wanted to.
Happy for you to take the lead.
Okay.
You're the ones who are sharing your experience, but we'll jump in with other questions if you want. But it's really a conversation, and we'd love you to share and lead it. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, so the first question is really, why are you engaged with it? And actually, when I had a quick meeting with these three yesterday, and I said that they were fully allowed to say, because Fiona made me. But if do you just want to take it in turns to just talk a wee bit about why you engaged with it, perhaps more than some of your peers did?
Sure, go for it. So I guess the basis was of it was because I'm still at uni, I'm still a student, and we covered it quite heavily in one of our modules, and as part of one of our ideal projects, we were encouraged to do learning for sustainability with doing an interdisciplinary project. So it was kind of, the two were married up together, but kind of having come away from that and having done the project and done the module, it still didn't quite understand it. So having that separate module to be able to do it on its own and quite understand learning for sustainability on its own, the module, as Mary's kind of shown you through, is the way that I did it. It quite sort of was able to describe it quite well and sort of take you through the ideas of what it's trying to achieve and how it can fit into your practice.
Lovely.
Yeah, for me, from the initial presentation from Fiona and Betsy, I realised that it was a really good resource that I could use to bring real world problems into the maths room. One of the things I was really keen to do when I decided to retrain as a maths teacher was not to just teach the maths, but to bring it into real everyday situations. And this resource, when I first came across it, gave me those resources that I could use to therefore answer those questions that the kids always have. Well, why are we learning this? Where's this in practice? Why am I going to do this? So as soon as we start looking into it, and I started looking at it into a bit more depth, then I realized it was a resource that could really help me throughout my teaching career.
Great. Amna?
Hi everyone. So for me, I'll just be honest, the way I kind of first viewed it was kind of a tick block exercise, just something just to, meet the kind of standards. But actually when I was doing the modules, I realised how much I didn't actually know about sustainability. And I think through doing the kind of module, I kind of had to it forced me to kind of really, from my personal point of view, I think awareness of kind of global issues that maybe I wasn't kind of aware of before. So it kind of forces you to really kind of reassess your own thinking. And that's just like from a personal point of view, just let alone like teaching and bringing that into the classroom. I found I had to kind of really understand it for myself first before I could teach it. I don't know if that makes sense. So I was kind of forced to really think and evaluate my own kind of knowledge on sustainability. What does that mean? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, totally. So let's have a wee think about how you engaged with it, because it was quite different for the three of you. So with Pete, it was a bit of a kind of prototype that I had contacted Learning for Sustainability Scotland, and they very kindly, you know, helped us to, well, they ran it, the modules online, and you guys engaged with it. By the time we got to your year, Amna, it had been a little bit more tailored towards ITE, because there were some aspects of it that were quite difficult to do as a student teacher. And then obviously, Rory, you have been engaging with the new module that's now up on the Learning for Sustainability Hub. So do you want to just talk a wee bit about how you actually engaged with it? And because again, it's certainly Amna and Pete, you managed to do the online work before you had to submit the assignment for the module that it was linked to, but Rory, you didn't have that advantage, did you?
No.
Yeah, so
sorry, what was that?
So I was just trying to work out the best orders to go, whether to go from where you
Let's
are
start
now.
with Pete then, and we'll work our way through.
So with us, yeah, it was definitely a prototype, and I think we were all finding our way with it a bit. As I said, we certainly were given a huge amount of information right at the beginning when we had the presentation, and we identified these resources. And I think what it did for me is we were so focused when we were, you know, when I was in my initial training year, on getting the lessons planned, identifying the material you're going to teach, and you're sort of very blinkered as to what you're doing. And I think what Learning for Sustainability did for me was it made me look at, actually, yes, I've got to teach this, but I could do it in such a way whereas I can come out of this tunnel vision that I've got and actually link across and communicate and work with other departments within the school. And by doing that, it built my relationship in the school a lot quicker. And it also made me look at different ways of presenting the material. For example, I started looking at, rather than just looking at some resources from online or from a textbook about building pie charts, I started looking at developing countries and generating real data from that pupils could actually engage with and ask questions. And it really developed conversations within the classroom that weren't just on maths, which I think is a good thing, because there's a lot of pupils in maths that are really shy and scared once you get into maths. And by actually just looking slightly outside those boundaries, still obviously keeping it topical, they could get involved in discussions, and suddenly they get brought into it, they get a bit more confident, and you're engaging the full class, and suddenly the whole class are engaged. You've got discussions going on, different peer-to-peer discussions, and you're doing the maths at the same time, and it's sort of naturally leading itself through, because then they're interested, well, where are we going to go from this data, and what can we do from that? So for me, it sort of opened my horizons a lot more and made me communicate better within the school, but also make the lessons a lot more interesting.
Great, thanks. Amna?
I think for me, the kind of game changer was learning about the Sustainable Development Goals, because from there, so we were kind of planning our lessons kind of hypothetically before, you know, we even went on placement and stuff. And I think for me, it was kind of choosing your kind of Sustainable Development Goals and then working in alignment with your like BGE, like the experiences and outcomes. So I had planned a series of lessons on like disease in less economically developed countries. So I was kind of looking at like the science behind the diseases and obviously kind of health and well-being. So, and there was a wee bit of scope for like IDL there as well. So we had planned like a series of like 3 lessons. And again, like even in my classroom just now, I have like all the Sustainable Development Goals on the wall. And whenever we're having, I think specifically with BGE, though it's kind of harder with the senior phase, but you can kind of make those connections a lot easier. And you know, if we're doing like renewable energy, we can talk about as like a topic in BGE. You can align that with like clean energy. So I think for me, the biggest thing is like the Sustainable Development Goals and then working all kind of like around that. It's actually amazing how many like connections you can make, and I think that was like the biggest thing that I kind of gained from that.
Lovely, thank you.
If that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely it does. Yeah. And Rory, so I guess you're coming at it from a slightly different perspective, because you haven't really had an opportunity to embed this into teaching as yet.
Yeah, totally. So I haven't worked through the workbook aspect of it that Mary was also pointing out, which I did probably maybe a couple of weekends ago over the space of 2 hours. So really the module itself, it doesn't really probably take that long, and she's totally correct when she says there's a lot of reflection in there, and it gives you an opportunity to sort of think about your practice, but also one part of it that struck me was how sustainable you are as a person. So what you can actually bring to it. So I'm very much agree that I like to do my bit for the environment and like to do recycling and watch David Attenborough documentaries and all that jazz. But it made me think more that I could actually bring more to the classroom and more to the lesson from that perspective, rather than just thinking about it as like a teacher base. But it's interesting as well, going on the back of what Pete said, that what Pete is currently doing, I can see myself trying to do in a couple of years' time, once I've got used to it and once I've got into the classroom, trying to think about my subject in physics and what's relevant. I even sort of going through the workbook as well, thinking about the topics and where you could fit it in. It doesn't always fit, so you're maybe not always going to be able to do it, but take advantage of the ones that you can. As Amnar said, recycling, renewables, and you've got electricity and efficiency within physics. So it's possibly one that stands out more than others, but then you've got waves and particles, and that's maybe not necessarily relevant to poverty or something to that effect. But it's that idea that if you maybe don't always see it, or maybe not always be able to fit it in, there's no right or wrong way of doing it, I guess.
Lovely, thank you. Kirsten, are we okay for time for another question, or would you prefer us to leave it at that?
No, please continue, because
Right.
This is fantastic. So over to you guys.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'm going to contract the last bit kind of into a oneer, because we've already covered a bit of it anyway. But I'd really like you all to talk about the impact that it's had on your practice. Rory, I know that's going to be difficult for you, but then perhaps thinking, and again, this is relevant to all of you, about how you think it's going to impact your practice in the future. I'm actually going to go to Amna on this one, because you were telling me a wee bit about how you'd already started to do certain things in school based on sustainability. So should we start with you?
Yeah, totally. I've actually joined as part of the, so obviously I'm in my probation year, so we're kind of encouraged to take part in wider school. And the kind of big one for me was sustainability. And this was obviously when the whole kind of COP26 Climate Change Week. So I'm part of like the Learning for Sustainability team at Notre Dame High School, and we have we've created logos, and we went through training for climate ready ambassadors. So kind of teaching that with S1 as well. They all got their certificate for that. So there's a lot of really good stuff that I've been part of in the school, which has really furthered my understanding of how to make sustainability accessible in the classroom. And obviously how naturally you can actually do this whenever you're, creating your lessons, even like these small things you start to pick up. So yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Pete?
Yeah, I think I sort of covered the impact a little bit in my last answer. Sorry about that, I jumped ahead a bit. But it was the whole class engagement. But for moving forward in the future, I've realised, excuse me, I've mainly focused on my BGE classes with learning sustainability. What I'd really like to do now is try and start implementing it with my Nat5s, my seniors. That's been really challenging this year, because obviously you get into the curriculum, all the material you've got to cover in the curriculum, it's very, very tight. And with COVID and everything, it's been a real challenge. So I think for me moving forward, I want to sort of make it part of my entire practice, not just my BGE practice. I've also worked, and I don't know if other people have come across this, I've linked quite well between learning sustainability and the Royal Academy of Engineering resources. I don't know if you looked at those online at all, but they've got some fantastic resources that also link to learning sustainability, and they give you some really great real world scenarios. And certainly with the mathematics that we start looking at in the senior level, it brings in some really great analysis, I think, that can really engage the pupils, such as vibration analysis. You can really get in some great real world maths. So for me, it's developing this learning sustainability out into my whole practice now. So I'm incorporating it in almost every lesson. And what I'd love to do, my aim, is for every topic in maths, when a pupil says, but why am I learning this, have an answer for every topic. And I'm struggling with some of them, as Rory said, to identify a few, saying, well, where can I do this? So so that's where I'm trying to go over the next couple of years, I think. Great.
I do think that that's where IDL comes in, is that you can then start to link to, you know, some of the other curricular areas, and you'll probably be able to do it that way.
Yeah.
Right, Rory, I know this is quite a tricky one for you, because, you know, you are still a fledgling teacher. So where do you think it's going to, how do you think you're going to be using it in the future?
I definitely agree with what Pete said, that I'd like to try and be how you implement it more into your curricular area, rather than, because BGE I think's pretty flexible with it, as well as you've mentioned already, IDL. That's obviously the basis behind our module in our assessment for one of our projects, was to be able to link the two together and do an IDL project. And as soon as you open up the benchmarks, even just for science, you can mash them all together in any shape or form. So yeah, trying to get an understanding as to how it fits more with the curricular area is probably going to be sort of more priority than anything else. But yeah, no, it's certainly, as student teachers, it's a difficult question.
I'll let you off. Right, is there anything else that any of you wanted to add before we finish up? In which case, thank you so much. It's lovely to see you all again, and back over to you. Thanks, Kirsten.
Well, that was absolutely fantastic. Can I just say a huge thanks on behalf of all of us to all of you, to all of you, Rory, Peter, Amna and Fiona. That was just fantastic. I'm going to stop the recording now.